Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vaught, the content director and the host here on the Word on Fire show. I'm joined by Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop Barron, welcome back.
Hey, Brandon. Always good to be with you.
The last couple of episodes, we've just shared the audio of your talks from England and Scotland and Ireland, because you've been on a whirlwind travel tour from LA over to Europe, back to LA, Europe again, DC. You finally had a few days to kind of rest and unwind. I got to spend a little time with you out in Santa Barbara along with our Word on Fire team. And you also got to do something you really love, which is play golf. How'd that go?
It was both good and bad. I played 2 days with my good friend, Father John Muir. My first day, not bad. In fact, I had my best 9, I think, ever. I shot an 84 on the front 9, which for me, I know the good golfers think, like, give me a break. But for me, that's pretty good. Second day, I was not so good. I think I started overthinking. You know, the first day I hadn't played for a long time, and you just kind of just go out and play. But by the second day, I was like, oh, I should do this, I should do that. And then you start overthinking, and my swing left me, and I was back to my usual, 90-something for the round. So anyway, they were fun, though.
Well, now you're back. We're recording this while you're in Santa Barbara. You're getting ready to go over to the Synod. And in fact, when this episode airs on October 1st, you'll be in Rome. So you're just a couple of days away. Give us some thoughts. What are you looking forward to about Rome? What are you expecting? How you feeling?
Oh, lots of good things. I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to a synod before, obviously. I like Rome. I've been there a lot. I spent 2 long sojourns there teaching. I'll be living at the North American College, which I love, and it's right next to the Vatican. I'm a little nervous in a way about the synod because I just don't know what it's like and what to expect. I've written my intervention, so we're all asked to give, or invited to give, I think, a 4-minute intervention. So I did that. We have to drop it off at the Synod Hall. And I'm just going to go into it with, an open mind, open heart, and see what happens. But I think it'll be fun. It's long. It's a full month over there. So I'll just kind of empty my suitcase and settle in,
Well, we're going to have some of the Word on Fire team joining you. And so I encourage all listeners to be sure to follow Bishop Barron's Facebook page, Instagram account, elsewhere. We're going to be sharing lots of daily videos, behind the scenes interviews, all sorts of fun stuff. So be sure to follow Word on Fire throughout the upcoming month. All right, Bishop, let's move on to the main news, the most exciting news, which is that today, October 1st, which also happens to be the feast of St. Therese, which I want to talk about here in a moment, marks the launch of our long-awaited Word on Fire Institute. I know all of us at Word on Fire are so excited. We've been working on this for months and months and months, and the doors are finally open. For people listening, you can go to the website wordonfire.institute. That's where you'll learn more and be able to sign up. But first of all, Bishop, you've been thinking about the idea of an institute for years, I think. It's been something on your radar for a while. Talk about how this first came to your mind.
Really, it was some of the younger people that worked at Word on Fire that said, we'd like something like a religious order or a religious movement. So not just a business, Word on Fire has been there for a long time, a ministry that, produces materials, et cetera. But these young people were so committed to it, they wanted it to be really a whole style of life. And so that was the idea, and it began to gestate and form. The Institute is a key moment, if you want, in that Word on Fire movement. The idea is to provide a series of courses online, lectures, courses, and so on. People will, if they join the Institute, be able to get access to these specialized videos, whose purpose is to form them as new evangelists. So my conviction has been for a long time, this is not just a priest and bishop thing, this is really a lay people thing. If lay people in an informed way can invade, the family space, the workspace, the space of the wider culture, if the Vatican II vision can be realized, the universal call to holiness and to sanctify the world. So we're trying to give, in our modest way, we're trying to give tools to lay people to do this work of evangelizing. This involves theological tools, it involves spirituality, it involves moral teaching, it involves practical evangelism, all that. So we've gathered a nice faculty of people. I'm one of the lecturers, but we have many others besides who are providing these courses. And then we hope that people will join the Institute, have a chance then to interact with the professors online, like through questions, interact with each other. So as online discussions will emerge. Then we hope eventually these online communities will start to form. So let's say all those who follow the Institute in Texas or in Southern California or in New York, et cetera, could come together in a more focused way. Eventually, I would hope forming communities on the ground, maybe evolving in time into Word on Fire centers around the country, the purpose of which is to form people as evangelizers. So that's the idea behind the movement, behind the Institute. So very happy, especially on the Feast of the Little Flower, who's one of our great patrons, that the movement and the Institute is being launched.
I know a lot of people have asked us about the distinction between the Institute and the movement, and am I part of this movement? And it's been a little tough for us to figure things out. I know canonically we're not yet a movement, maybe with a capital M, but certainly this Institute is a part of the lowercase m Word on Fire movement that's been going on for years. Would you say that this lowercase m movement is something both international and substantial? It's a real thing that's happening.
Yeah, and it's happened, just sort of organically. It's happened over the years. It's people that follow Word on Fire all over the world. And that's one of the great beauties of the internet. You and I are well aware of the limitations of the internet and social media and the negativities, and I acknowledge that. But we'd be silly, it seems to me, to overlook the real advantages of it. And that's one, that you can form communities that spread all over the world. And that's happened with Word on Fire. A lot of people who have been drawn into the teaching material that I've given over the years that really want to be part of this evangelizing of the wider society, this Christification of the world that Vatican II called for. And Brandon, you and I have talked a lot about the pressing need of our time, which is the rise of the nuns, the rise of the unaffiliated, the rise of secularism, even an aggressive secularism, a deep skepticism about religion, and the damage that's done to people in general, young people in particular. And so we've wanted to respond to that. And that's the whole purpose of the movement. Get evangelizers on the ground. We've been talking about it in the church for a long time. I don't think we've done enough, though, to make it happen. So that's what we're trying to do.
One thing I especially like about this Word on Fire Institute is that all of the courses focus on major intellectual issues that are central to the task of evangelization. I found over the years of being Catholic that there are many parish programs, many services, many websites that focus more on the pastoral tasks of evangelization, the soft skills of talking with people, welcoming them, that kind of stuff. But you've made it your mission, especially over the last couple of years. Let's focus on the intellectual reasons why people leave the faith or reject the faith, and let's get equipped on those. So that seems to be a major focus of your new institute. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. I buy it. I get it. I affirm it, that we need skills in these practical areas. That's part of the picture. But yes, I think for the past about 50 years, we've dumbed down the faith. We've underemphasized the intellectual dimension. And that's been, as I've said 100 times, a pastoral disaster. You want to bring the pastoral into it, I bring it there. I think it's been a pastoral disaster that we've so dumbed down the faith that people don't find it intellectually compelling, especially young people. You and I both know this. They say it over and over again in the surveys. They don't find the teachings credible. They don't find them rational. They're unscientific. And that's why they claim they're leaving the faith. So, yeah, I want to get people who are well-formed intellectually. That's an essential part. It's been true across the centuries of the church's life. The great evangelizers have been people deeply grounded in the theological tradition. So I hate the wedge that we've often driven between, the life of the mind and the pastoral, between the head and the heart. Those are stupid distinctions, and they've been extremely damaging in the life of the church.
Why is it significant that we're launching this Word on Fire Institute on the feast day of the Little Flower?
Well, because I love her, and she's been from the beginning a key player in my own spirituality, and then by extension to Word on Fire. But, she's not only a great doctor of the church, a master of the spiritual life, and I really believe that. She's not at the intellectual level of an Aquinas or an Augustine, but there was a perceptiveness, spiritually speaking, that was extraordinary in her. But then secondly, she's a great patroness of the missions, right? She's a missionary figure. And in the beautiful kind of delicious irony of the church, this woman that never left the confines of her little Carmel in Normandy, but yet she's the patroness of the missions because she had this heart for it. She had the heart for missionary work, and she wanted to pray and reach out, spiritually. So I've always felt the little flower from her heavenly place now is very interested in the missionary outreach of the church, and we've claimed her, of course, as a patroness from the very beginning. So that's why we're delighted to launch this on her feast day.
Well, I want to give people a little sense of what they can expect inside the Word on Fire Institute after they sign up. One of the things that we're including when you sign up for the Word on Fire Institute is complete access to our Word on Fire digital library. Mm-hmm. So this means you have 100% streaming access to all of Bishop Barron's films, including the Catholicism series, Pivotal Players, all of the study programs. So that alone is immensely valuable. But then inside the Institute itself, we have several courses that are taught by what we're calling Word on Fire Institute Fellows. Mm-hmm. Now, we'll cover some of the topics here in a moment, Bishop, but I want to highlight maybe the flagship course, which is your own. The first course you're teaching in the Word on Fire Institute is the theology of Hans Urs von Balthasar. Now, that name is probably pretty familiar to a lot of listeners of this show, but why that course? Why start with that one?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is anyone that's read my work over the years or watched my video work knows that Balthasar has been a big influence on me. I said, in fact, in the opening lecture for the Institute, I said, as you listen to me talk about Balthasar, if you've been attentive to my work, you probably say, oh, that's where he got that idea from the priority of Christ, or, oh, that's where that idea from And Now I See came from, or, oh, that's why in the Catholicism series he did, X, Y, and Z. So Balthasar was a very formative influence on me. One of the most important voices in the 20th century, I think clearly the favorite theologian of both St. John Paul II and Joseph Ratzinger. So someone that had a major impact on the Vatican II generation and on the subsequent papacies, and on my own thinking. And I think he's very rich when it comes to a compelling presentation of the Catholic faith in our culture today. Balthasar was one of the most culturally plugged-in figures of the 20th century. De Lubac, who was his friend, the great Jesuit Henri de Lubac, said he's the most cultured man in Europe, which is an extraordinary thing. Imagine like in the year 1950, think of all the figures in Europe and all the different areas. And he said, he was the most cultivated, the most cultured man in Europe. Member of the Académie Française, for example. So here's someone, a Swiss, native language is German, but he becomes a member of the French Academy because he was such a master of French. For all those reasons, Balthasar, I think, is a key player in this time. So I lay him out. I taught a course for many years at the seminary in Balthasar. So I taught a 18 lecture course, So I brought that down somewhat in terms of time, but it's laid out in an intellectually serious way. It's not like just Balthasar for dummies, it's laying out Balthasar in a serious way. And I hope that sets the tone for the kind of course that we're offering.
I think it does. It's a high level, really engaging course. I know there's going to be some people a little worried that, I haven't had any theology or philosophy courses. I don't want it to be over my head, but I want to encourage listeners that within the Word on Fire Institute, for all of our courses, we have extensive workbooks that guide you through the material and help you to remember it. We also have a dynamic community area where you can interact with other students, ask questions, and the Word on Fire fellows are in there engaging you as well. So this isn't just pull up a video and watch it. This is a formation experience.
Yeah, my hope is that you can ask the lecturer, him or herself, or you can ask other members of the community, hey, when Bishop Barron said this about Balthasar, what did he mean? And I didn't really get that point. Good. It's like an online classroom, online discussion. And I think that's really healthy in the life of the church.
One of the other flagship courses that we have inside the Institute is Jared Zimmerer's course on the 8 principles of Word on Fire. We've been teasing those out over the past year, really. We've done a podcast episode on each of them. We've released some of these short videos highlighting those principles. What strikes me about those is this Institute is not just about absorbing knowledge about intellectual questions. It's really about formation, inculcating these 8 principles in our life. It seems like you want to build not just evangelists who know the right things, but who embody a particular way of life.
Right. And that goes way back, even to the pre-Christian philosophical world in the ancient setting. The philosopher was not like just a teacher. That's a very modern idea, that you'd walk into a classroom and you'd give a series of lectures. For the ancient people, someone like Plato or Parmenides or Aristotle was a master of what they call the bios, a life, right? A whole way of life. And that comes up through the church fathers very strongly, And even in the Acts of the Apostles, when the church is named as a way, a hodos in Greek, it's a way of life. And so I want that to be the case too with Word on Fire, that it's a manner of living that's shaped by these great principles. The unwavering Christocentrism, for example, that your life's not about you; it's about the Lord. Leading with beauty. Well, there's a whole way of life behind that idea. The use of the new media, not just a technique, but it's a immersion into a dimension of our culture that is essential to this work. Et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I want, not just information, but formation in a way of life.
Well, in addition to those two courses, the one from Bishop Barron and the one from Jared Zimmer, we've already recorded, I think, around 5 or 6 other courses now. We've had several studio days. Each of these courses has somewhere around 6 to 8 to 10 lessons within it. So you can imagine we're talking dozens and dozens of video lessons and courses that we're going to be rolling out here as we move forward with the Institute. One thing I like, Bishop, that you've done with your Institute is you haven't just sort of arbitrarily chosen topics and people to teach these courses. It seems to me that what you're trying to do is answer the questions that the nuns in ONES are asking on the ground. In fact, I think you're planning to bring this point up in the intervention, aren't you? That we should focus on the major questions and issues of our time.
Absolutely. In my intervention, I talk about Aquinas' Questiones Disputate in the Middle Ages, the disputed questions, which arise from the concerns and anxieties of the people in the classroom. So you read Aquinas' somewhat arid text, but you realize they're coming up out of very rich debates that emerge from the questions that real people had. So what are the questions that real people have? We know today, they tell us in survey after survey. It's not that mysterious. And we've talked about them: religion and science, religion and violence, the role of the Bible, the sex abuse scandals, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to respond to the very questions people are raising. So that's the name of the game.
I think it's maybe presumptive to put the Word on Fire movement in league with, say, the Dominicans or the Franciscans or the Jesuits, but it is interesting to consider how each of those groups started much, much smaller than what Word on Fire is beginning with here. You've mentioned the power of the new media, that if Ignatius of Loyola had the internet, he could have welcomed millions of Jesuit novices from all over the world, but he didn't. We do. And so suddenly this is not just a national thing, but it's an international gathering of people around these principles.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, I just every morning in my holy hour, I bring this before the Lord and just say, Lord, if it's your will, give it life and let it rise. So we don't know. We're going to try. I used to tell my students at the seminary, you do what you think the Lord's prompting you to do. You ride that horse as long as you can. If it's shot out from under you, all right, look for a new horse and then try, the new task. So we've all together kind of discerned this is something that we think God wants us to do. Okay, let's see. Let's give it a go and turn it over to our heavenly friends and to the Lord and see what happens with it. So I'm excited about it, hopeful, but finally it's all in God's hands.
So again, that's the Word on Fire Institute, which you can learn more about and sign up at wordonfire.institute. The doors just opened today, and when you sign up, we've got all tons of cool things that we're throwing in, including, as I mentioned, access to the Word on Fire digital platform, where you get 100% access to all of Bishop Barron's videos and materials. Bishop, before we wrap up this episode, there's something I meant to ask you at the beginning, but I forgot to. I wanted to talk about your experience doing the Reddit Q&A, which we just did last week. So just a little brief background. Reddit is the 5th most popular website on the internet. It's basically a giant discussion forum. So if you've ever been in the comment boxes on YouTube or Facebook, you get the idea. But it's been lamented as sort of a cesspool or a wild west of the internet because most commenters are real snarky, often nasty. However, you decided to go in there and do what's called an AMA, Ask Me Anything. You basically said, I'm a Catholic bishop. I love engaging atheists and agnostics online. Ask me anything. And you sat down for about an hour and a half answering questions. Talk a little bit about that experience.
I loved it. And as you say, people mention, Reddit, it's terrible. Well, I mean, heck, I've been doing this for 20 years on YouTube. I didn't find it off the charts challenging or snarky. I mean, I'm used to snark, believe me. I'm on YouTube. 92% of comments are negative. So I get that. And I kind of get a kick out of engaging people who are at least somewhat serious about it. So no, I didn't find that really off-putting. The difficulty to me was there were so many comments coming in, I couldn't possibly respond to them. There were like 10,000, wasn't it? So I tried to just quickly go through and find what I could respond to. The trouble was, I mean, frankly, it was just limited time and so many questions that I couldn't really give even close to adequate answers to some of these, typically difficult questions about God, about evil, about providence, about, the sex scandals and everything else. But I got a kick out of it. I sort of like that forum. It doesn't bother me. It reminds me again of the Middle Ages when someone like Thomas Aquinas would engage in what they called quadlibetal questions. Quadlibet in Latin means what you want, whatever you want. And so the quadlibetal was the master would come in and, okay, here I am, ask me anything. So AMA, that was true in the 13th century in Paris. So why not today?
I think you told me when we were talking about these quadlibetal questions that Aquinas was in some ways unique in that he enjoyed and thrived in these AMAs of the 13th century, whereas some other professors, it made them a little nervous about what questions.
A lot nervous, but by all accounts, Aquinas was like the heavyweight champion of the AMA of the 13th century. That he liked that forum, and understandably, many professors would kind of shy away. Like if there's greater control, at least I know what I'm going to be talking about and the kind of questions I'll get. But Aquinas liked that freewheeling Parisian style. So why not? That's typical of our time. And the church, we're not afraid of any question. If Thomas Aquinas can say, utrum Deus sit, which means, whether there's a God, that's a question he poses in the first part of the Summa. Okay, if that's a fair question, I think anything's a fair question. We have nothing against questions, So I think it's good for us to show that side of the church's life.
I agree. I think most of your responses were fantastic, but just the act of a Catholic bishop saying, ask me anything, speaks maybe more volumes than the actual answers you gave. I remember we've looked at different surveys of why people have left the church, and especially among evangelicals more than Catholics, they would say, whenever I asked a difficult question, it was dismissed or ignored. And so I figured they didn't want to deal with the tough issues. But you sitting in that chair saying, ask away.
It's not our tradition. It's not Catholicism. Whatever that is, this running away from questions and sacrificing the life of the mind, that's not Catholicism. And so, we're a smart religion, we're a beautiful religion, and our great people have been at the cutting edge of the cultural movements of their time. Think of Augustine, think of Thomas Aquinas, think of John Henry Newman, think of G.K. Chesterton, think of John Paul II in more recent years. That's where the church belongs. That's where it puts itself purposely. So no, I'm against all forms of anti-intellectualism. I'm against all forms of sentimentalizing the faith, or that we retreat into our little private zone of faith. That's not real faith. If you're retreating into a private zone where questions aren't permitted, that's not faith. That's called credulity, or that's called superstition, So we stand athwart all of that.
Well, it's time now for one of our questions from our great listeners. If you have a question, we want to hear it. Ask Bishop Barron anything. So just go to askbishopbarron.com, record your question on any device, and we might choose yours in a future episode. Today we have a question from a young man in Dallas who's asking something along the lines of the topics we've been discussing here, the intellectual life and the life of the mind. So here's his question.
Hey, Bishop Barron, this is John Paul from Dallas, Texas. I love a phrase that you used where the Catholic Church never asks us to sacrifice our intellect, sacrificium intellectus. When I searched that phrase, I found that actually St. Ignatius of Loyola would ask his Jesuit followers to do exactly that. Wonder if you could reconcile those two things on why a saint of the Church would ask his followers to do that, but then the Catholic Church doesn't. Love the work you do. Appreciate any help.
Yeah, God bless you. It's a good question. Sometimes the mystics, and Ignatius is a mystic, go over the top to make their point. Mystics are not always disciplined in their manner of expression because they've been seized by the power of the Holy Spirit and they want to make a point dramatically. Think, for example, of the young Ignatius who spends about a year in a cave in Manresa in Spain. Lets his hair grow, lets his fingernails grow long, does radical fasting, the whole bit. For that period of his life, he lived very radically, and it was to prepare himself, for the work he was going to do. Now, the rest of his life, he didn't live that way. He didn't live in a cave. He cut his hair, he cut his fingernails, and all that. But for that moment, he gave himself to a very radical form. You find that in the lives of a lot of the saints. In a similar way, in speech, sometimes the mystics, especially, will go over the top to make a point. Now, when theologically minded people start looking at that, they'll probably draw back and make the right distinctions. So Ignatius, what does he mean when he says, sacrifice the intellect? It's that radical obedience to God that's called for, the letting go of my own prideful mind, my own prideful projects and plans, etc. So I sacrifice that. Now, does he mean that we surrender to credulity and superstition? Well, no. And I'll give us my evidence there. Look at his sons over the centuries. I mean, the Jesuits have one of the most powerfully intellectual traditions in the church. They've never engaged in a sacrificium intellectus in that sense. From, Robert Bellarmine to Karl Rahner and Henri de Lubac. I mean, you've got this very, very intellectually informed Jesuit tradition. So I guess I'd put it in that framework. It's the way mystics talk sometimes. It's a little bit over the top.
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Word on Fire show. Again, we invite you to join us inside the Word on Fire Institute, which just launched today. You can find it by going to the website wordonfire.institute. When you sign up right away, you get a customized dashboard. You get access to all the courses we have, including Bishop Barron's course on von Balthasar. You get access to the community area where you can find support from the Institute fellows and other students. And you get unlimited access to all the videos Bishop Barron has ever produced. So please come join us, stimulate your intellect, and join this great army of evangelists that are set out to change the world. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Word on Fire show.